Hello and welcome to the Echo Chamber podcast. My name is Tony Groves and today we're at the coalface. As always, I'm joined by my co-host and the man who's most likely to look like the royal baby. In fairness, Martin, you look like most babies, let's tell the truth.
Yeah. It looks an attractive quality. Women like babies.
Yeah, as ugly as that is. Yeah. But much more importantly, I'm delighted to be joined in the Tortoise Shack by social scientist, director of Inner City Helping Homlessness, equality activist, and now a member of Action Against Sexual Violence Ireland, Clare O'Connor. Clare, thanks for coming on the podcast and just reading all the things you're bloody involved with and a member of. It's actually tiring. You know, it makes me wonder. I go, yeah, I'm very productive, I think. And then I realise what people like you do, and when I say we're at the coalface, you're at the coalface in so many different organisations. It's a real credit to you. And what have you, 9 kids at home?
It feels like I have a 1 and a 2-year-old, so yeah, it feels like about 8 or 9 at times.
Yeah. No, look, we've met before, and you're a ball of energy, and it's great to talk to you. But it was, thanks for coming over, I suppose.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here. I'm a big fangirl, as you know. So, pretty much stalking my way into the room, into the Tortoise Shack.
I didn't even know we had a fangirl now.
Oh, number one fangirl. Yeah, definitely.
We're going to start off with Action Against Sexual Violence Ireland. I know this is something that has sprung up out of the results in the Belfast trial and the outcry and what actually happened. We're kind of proud here that some of the founding members here are people who we spoke to in Linda Hayden and Hazel Catherine Larkin, and these are great people who have an inner steel. And I think some of the events and the outcry actually said, you know what, we're going to get out and do something about this.
Yeah.
How did you get involved?
I suppose same as everybody else. It's all Linda's fault. I was on Twitter.
Linda, we're going to get you.
Yeah. So I follow Linda on Twitter. I had followed as well the Belfast rape trial. I'd heard Linda on the podcast, and she put up a tweet the day of the trial, of the verdict, to just say, I need to do something. I can't sit back. I felt as strongly as she did. I had the similar experiences to her over the previous months, that I was in WhatsApp groups and I, meeting friends who had similar experiences, that everybody was so affected by it. Everybody was so triggered by it. Everybody was so horrified at the language that was used. And then when the verdict came in, and the language that was being used just, amped up a whole other level. I found people that I had previously respected just saying the most damaging things, and I just thought, no, can't sit by and let this happen.
Yeah, I share that because there was a lot of people who were, jumped on the whole not guilty verdict as if it was it done away with everything. We know the IRFU did the right thing in the end, where the guys had their contract suspended. But it's more than that. That spoke to a culture which isn't just in sports and rugby. It's in lad culture and
it's rape culture. That because the language that was used after, and particularly people that I found one of the worst things that came from the verdict was people saying, I knew she was lying in the first place. You don't do that. That's not how you act. You wouldn't do this. You wouldn't do that if you were raped. And that just sent me apoplectic. I ended up getting into these kind of discussions on Facebook, and I think so many people are misinformed about what actually happens when somebody's raped. Down to the biological factors. You only have to get onto the Rape Crisis Centre and read some of the research that's done. That I think a lot of people understand fight or flight, but they don't understand the freeze, which is a biological reaction, and it tends to come in circumstances like, rape or sexual assault. And the body actually freezes. There's a hormonal reaction that your body feels like it's protecting itself. It can affect the vocal cords. You can't speak, you can't scream. You feel like, you're the only way to get out of this safely is to freeze. Or there's another reaction that's called friend, and it's that, just hold tight, don't cause any trouble, and you'll get out of this as soon as possible. That
I find that aspect chilling, and yet makes total sense, where I've heard victims of rape who've said they've almost tried to encourage the rapist to finish. To finish, just so they can get out of this ordeal. I mean, I can't just trying to get the words out to explain that. It's just staggering, that you're sitting there and you're being the victim of a sexual assault, and you're thinking, well, it might be easier to have oral sex with this guy because
it'll prevent something else even.
Yeah. It'll prevent something even more vile happening to me. That's something where, legally speaking, how do you prove that? I don't know. But emotionally and what it does to someone's relationship with sex and intimacy. It must be devastating.
Yeah, and again, I think that speaks to you finding it difficult to even say those words. Speaks to the culture that we have, that it's so difficult in general it's so horrific that you don't want to speak about it. Nobody wants to speak about it. But we have got to the stage now where it has to, because if you look at that case down, was it Cork or Kerry? I think it was Cork. The list, the rape list in Skill. I mean, they're Skill kids, and if they feel that it's acceptable enough to put that out there, that amount of boys that nobody actually said anything, and again, that's rape culture. Rape culture is when, a large proportion of society think it's more likely that somebody is lying, which happens, research is done in 2% of reported cases. So a tiny percentage in the actual, vast sphere of what goes on out there. But, I mean, if you think it's more likely that somebody's lying when the stats are so overwhelmingly, contradicting that, you have to question why you think that. Why you think so little of women particularly. And I do want to say that ASVI is, it's not an organisation just for women. We want to, stand for all victims of sexual violence. We want to, advocate on behalf of, anybody that's experienced anything from unwanted attention right through to rape.
Well, the narrative post-trial on, either RTE or the other Dinibot radio, the narrative was awful. As a bloke, I find the narrative awful. And the narrative is, it's been really hard on these guys. Let's not try and compare what the consequences of the action or the consequences of the situation for that girl are far worse than privileged guys who are going to lose out on a bit of privilege. Yeah. Sorry, that's not even in the same ballpark. It's not the same field. Yet, this was the narrative pushed out. And I heard it very clearly. I was going, God, that's outrageous. That is outrageous. And it's class too. The class is involved there.
Oh yeah. There's a couple of different layers
involved in that. I can't see that immediate rehabilitation attempt happen if it was young fellas from a team, Ballymun Kickers. I can't see that happening. I couldn't see that happening.
You say people wouldn't be coming to the events?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
I think that highlights two things. I mean, the first is that verdict aside, and whether you think that this act was rape, because I think that's a big part of it. It's, the details of the trial on opposing sides weren't that different. What was said, what was admitted to, and what was actually been accused. There was very little difference in it. But it comes down to what do you believe rape is. And we in this society believe that unless you're kicking and screaming, or you're dragged into a bush, it's not rape. Consent has to be taken away very aggressively as opposed to agreed upon by two people. So that's, I suppose, one aspect of it. And then we are coming from not post-Catholic Church, but I think emerging from the Catholic Church, in that women are just, our subconscious, we're so strongly told that women are worthless. And that's the way it is. Women are worthless in society. They're less likely to be believed. We don't think they're capable of making decisions.
Another day, another 78 cent.
Well, yeah, those kind of things you can measure and those kind of things you can argue. But as soon as you get into talking about, say, toxic masculinity, everybody's in uproar because it feels like it's an attack on men. And I have a 1-year-old boy and a 2-year-old girl, and I think toxic masculinity is as dangerous to both of them. I don't want my little boy growing up and feeling like his worth will come from how many girls he sleeps with, or if he's able to talk about rape jokes in a group and he doesn't feel like he can say something about it. And that's where it's heading for boys. And that filters through right through the levels up to the media. So it's like you said, class. I definitely don't think that if it was a local team here that they'd be the same people who'd be jumping out to defend them.
No.
Like we've seen so many cases, Annabelle, those kind of things where it's, they have a future,
Yes. They're actually real members of society.
Yeah,
these are boys that have just slipped.
The day of the verdict, the Indo did run a piece immediately with talking about Paddy Jackson's, how he went to one of the most prestigious schools in Belfast. These lines were used about how he was garnered for greatness from a young age. All these phrases, but then you go to Willie John McBride going on and saying, "Give the boys their jobs back." Now, what I think also has happened is the disconnect between the commentariat and the actual general population has really started to change. Whether that was George Hook changing it because he put his foot in his mouth over and over repeatedly, and people just said, we're not going to take it anymore. And it turns out, actually, what happens is when sponsors get involved, Bank of Ireland said,
it's the money.
if you don't do something, we're going to pull our plug. And then all of a sudden, the decision was made to cut the lads' contracts. So money does talk, absolutely. But through those examples, then you then lay a template for when these things happen. That, we had Paddy Jackson saying he was going to sue anybody who attacked his good name, to then issue in a statement that I didn't live up to the values. Because how can he sue 250,000 people who don't believe you, Pat?
And his PR team said, this is how you're going to look if you do that. This is, if all you care about is rehabilitating your image, and that's really what it came down to. He realised that the sense of entitlement that he thought he was going to get away with it, and that he could stifle public opinion like that. Because you take away the verdict, you take away the legality of it. How they behaved was horrific. They treated that girl awfully, and all of these contracts have a morality clause.
But outside of leaving that individual case aside, in the context of the what you call toxic masculinity, but also about the Cork, where's the education going into schools? Where's the talking about how we actually talk about this to our children, how our children are learning about it? Can they, I'm not going to say let's put it all on the schools, because parents have to be parents as well.
I think parents need to be educated as well, though, because we're coming from a totally different society, and we put a submission in on Friday to the Oireachtas Committee on Education and Skills, because they're looking to reform it, but they're looking to reform it and it's within the ethos of the school. And as you know, we have so little choice when it comes to the schools that we send our kids to, because they're overwhelmingly Catholic. And you can't say, well, we're going to put all this research in, we're going to take best practice around the world, which has been proven to, benefit kids. The alternative actually damages kids, but only if the school is allowed. So there's a huge amount of research about how even, doctors speaking to kids. So from toddlerhood, treating kids like they have some autonomy over their bodies. So asking a child if you can listen in their ear or listen in their throat, or making them feel like they have the ability to say, no, I'm not forcing your kid to kiss somebody they don't want to kiss and hug somebody they don't want. So that's, starting right from toddlerhood. But so many people they don't think they're doing anything wrong when they do that. So I think you need to educate parents, you need to educate anybody that's coming into interaction with kids, public health nurses, doctors, because some people are in the job 30, 40 years and they don't see that as an issue. They maybe haven't, been taught about the research, but then when it gets into schools, kids need to be taught about the real names for their body parts, because it literally protects them from child sexual abuse. Like, we know that there's a huge body of research that if you stop using pet names and use real names and stop being ashamed of it, talking about it, because kids pick up on the embarrassment that we feel about talking about it. So if something happens to them, they think you don't want to hear about it.
Strangely enough, my brother in Australia is there with his kids in Australia, and they're going through this process at the moment in their school. So my nephew was asked to come up with as many names as he could possibly think of for female genitalia. So my brother took this really seriously, and they spent weeks researching and tracking down all these names, and they were going to get as many names as they possibly could. And what they were doing, this child was then going to read these out in class.
And how old is he?
He would have been about 13, 14. And they were going to read out all these names in class. And then say, it all means the same thing.
That's
they were going to go through all these names. The other thing they do over there that we don't particularly do over here, and better name it, sport, particularly male sport, where it's team sports, is toxic. It's toxic. The atmosphere. Anybody who's been involved, any guy who has played sport will tell you, oh yeah, it's toxic. Yeah. It is, and it's particularly toxic, pre-match or pre-whatever you do, and your focus is there, but it's afterwards, and it is afterwards, when the bravado is up and the blood is up.
There's been huge issues in Australian rugby league about
I know, and they're trying to they are trying to address it, whereas here we're saying, well, it's maybe we'll get the schools to do it, and the schools can
but what I think is, when you use a sentence then, like, in keeping with the ethos of the school, it just puts the brakes on. It's the same with everything. It's like, let's have a maternity hospital and then have it with a Catholic ethos. Yeah. And, if you say it's the second part of the sentence totally negates the first part.
You can't have best practice in this circumstance, and best practice, because you're literally, you're putting kids at risk. We know that kids are more likely to experience long-term child sexual abuse if they don't know, for instance, the correct body parts.
Yeah.
Now, a Catholic school, more than likely, is not going to allow that that kind of education to happen. So, I mean, we need to say, well, okay, what comes first? Our kids' health and their safety, or, a Catholic ethos? And that's really what it comes down to.
And what is very funny about you saying that is this is something that we can help kids be protected from sexual assault and sexual deviancy, right? Mm. And yet on the flip side, we have Egypt saying, if we put the PSC cards on Facebook, we can protect them from. So they want to do these things in terms of the internet, which is just really about internet control to the most part. And yet when you can actually affect something in a school that is organised by the state, it's whether it's subvention or they're receiving money from the state, that's where it's paid for.
I think it shows priorities. And,
does.
We need to, and again, this is me speaking on a personal capacity here. We haven't got policies around this in Ansfi, but look at our history. We have to start talking about what the church has done to this country. I mean, it's only, 18 years really since the scandals started coming out about child sexual abuse in the church, but I just feel like it's as if people have forgotten about it. It comes up the odd time and tune will happen and people will be horrified, but that was any other organisation by the Catholic Church that had such wide scale sexual, physical, emotional abuse, the control of the family, the complete demonisation of women. I mean, they just wouldn't be here anymore. They wouldn't be in the country.
Well, I think also, though, we have to take stock and say how great some of these developments that have happened in the last 12 months have been. I remember when I reached out to Linda Hayden to come on the podcast and I said, would you come on and stand-up comedian, And she said, okay. And then she rang me back and she said, oh, and by the way, I was the victim of rape 17 years ago, and can we talk about that? And I went, well, that's not what I had in mind, But sure, yeah. And,
even better,
But again, yes. But then when you turn around and then you say to her, well, how is Asfi getting on? And she's like, going, oh yeah, we're overwhelmed with people who are helping. Yeah. We're writing policies. We're working with.
It's insane how quick things have happened.
Yes,
I mean, it's absolutely insane.
And people are contributing, and people are volunteering. That sort of activism wouldn't have been possible 10 years ago because social media helps connect people now like a way that can't be controlled, and B, the stigma of actually admitting what happened to you or saying stuff like that. People would have been more coy about coming out and say, that's me as well. I was a victim. Yeah.
Every one person that speaks out in anything gives so many other people a voice, and like Linda doing that, and you've met Linda, she's an absolute powerhouse. Like to think that, but to think, pretty much. I was going to be a little bit nicer because I have to face her after this. But I mean, if you think that it was so difficult,
she told me you called her boss. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And tip of the hat on events and A. That's it. That's how we got. Basically, that was like if you want to join, we got an automatic reply saying this is how you have to treat me. Yeah, definitely. I think it's the only reason she set Asvi up, to be honest.
We know historically that the state has never been really serious about addressing rape or Nolan Blackwell for years and years has been trying to get this message out that there needs to be more funding, particularly needs to be more research.
Yeah.
And Nolan's been trying to get this out for years and years, and it's just ignored year in, year out. And she's tireless. Never, ever stopped. Totally tireless.
And it's 2002, it's 16 years since the original Savvy report was done, and this year €1 million, so that's the report around basically sexual violence in Ireland, but €1 million has been committed to have another Savvy report, which is amazing. But when you think it's been that long, it's been 16 years, again, it shows the real interest and the real priorities of the government, that we know that, unless you kick and scream and you cause a fuss, that you're not going to, the money's going to go where the outrage is. And the movements that are happening this year have been, 100 years from the vote, the Me Too movement, there's so much stuff going on. It really does feel like the right time. It feels like people are engaged, people feel like they have a voice, particularly women. And again, this isn't just women. Sexual violence really affects a lot of men. And there's probably even an additional stigma in speaking out against men, because again, toxic masculinity, that, if you're not a macho man, you're deemed to be, less than, you're deemed to be weak and you don't fit in. So, but, people like Nolly Blackwell, when you think that she's been working on this for so long, the Right Crisis Centre, and there are a couple of other smaller groups offering, counselling to specific groups, but not, it must be so frustrating to her to be working this long, to look and see, to be I'm only really starting to research this in depth, as in the science behind it and the actual stats in Ireland and what's being covered up, and it's it's horrific. I feel so angry all the time. I don't know how she's managed to stay as engaged and as positive and as approachable as she has.
I've met Nolan, and she is such a nice person. and really is a genuine, heartfelt, concerned person.
Yeah.
It's not that she's doing this because it's a job. She's doing this because she actually truly believes it needs to be done.
I don't think you can stay involved in something like this long term unless it's a passion, because it would wear you down, because you're hearing people's stories, you're seeing, and like that, when I saw the divide after the Belfast rape trial, and I just saw the opinion that this is how people think, and some people can see very clearly what's going on in the country, and they can see, because it really comes back to your opinion on women, and it comes back to your opinion on what men are entitled to do to women. That's that trial particularly, but and then you start looking into, again, sex education. When I start researching it for the submission, I was horrified that there's no consensus from the Department of Education of what needs to be done. A lot of primary schools don't have it at all. We found some schools that had religious groups come in, and the things that they told, you basically, consent. Once you give consent forever. Things like this that wasn't too long ago. And
that was let's be honest. A husband could rape his wife, and until, I think was it 93 or something.
Yeah, it was in the last couple of decades.
You're talking.
Only one person's been convicted of it.
Yeah,
but more importantly, because again, listen, this should be an arduous process to make sure that things are done correctly. But
we have to have a justice system, but you can't have a justice system that starts off as the justice system grew up out of a society that was built by men to support men. I tell the story about historically when Judaism was in its infancy. There was there was a few guys rolled into Elephantine in Egypt, and they realized that there were women divorcing men and keeping the houses, and they went, "Oh, actually, someone write a line that said Moses said that couldn't happen." So you go back and rewrite your text, your religious text, to say, and when you can do that and dispossess things, that's and then women become, look, you go outside, sorry to bring it back to this, but you go outside and the posters don't show a woman's face on repeal. It's just the woman as a vessel.
But similarly, I had, again, it's more repeal, but somebody came at me last night online saying that but is it not true that you're less likely to get pregnant or rape because of some biological factor? Your body goes into shock, so you're not. And I had to go back to him and say, no, that was a story that was basically invented decades ago, so that interfamily, like incest, it came from a place of trying to defend incest. That if you get your child pregnant by raping them, well, we won't have any, genetic issues. That's actually where that came from, centuries ago. And this is somebody thrown at me in 2018 saying, well, let's not use rape as an issue in, repeal the age, because it's actually not really that likely. No fact, no basis, and actually comes from the most misogynistic, horrific, reasoning.
Yeah, but there's a lot of, and we had a little pre-pod discussion about this. There are a lot of, you call them shock jocks, I call them assholes. And they're perpetuating these stupid tropes, these things that we know are blatantly untrue. Yet there's a credibility given because somebody's discussing, somebody in a position of authority on a radio station says, well, actually, a woman can't get pregnant. And what they'll say is, well, in all fairness, we've all heard the phrase, and they distance the phrase from themselves, and then they say this abhorrent thing without actually taking the responsibility for saying it. So they just stoke a prejudice, or they stoke a stereotype.
I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm just putting it out there. I'm not saying that's my opinion, but it's a sensationalism themselves, which we know. But
we have a problem with that in the commentariat, because we have a real issue that it's a mentality where, look, this is good for us because it'll get, whether it's clicks or we'll trend on Twitter, or we'll get views, or whatever the mentality is. And it is quite toxic, because you end up with situations where, you end up with Ivan Yates and Matt Cooper pretending that they both disagree with one another when they're, there's the width of a toilet paper between them.
And it reinforces people's, the prejudice that are already there. So whereas we should be calling out prejudice and saying, I'm all for debate. I've had this quite a lot over the past couple of days. I'm happy to debate anything, and I respect other people's opinions. But when your opinion actively damages people, no, you're not entitled to that. You're not entitled to, to hurt people with your prejudice. I'm kind of sick of that now at this stage. It's coming up a lot with repeal, and there's so many people, in the centre, have genuine concerns that need to be listened to, and people need to be given the real information and the facts. But when it comes down to you're damaging people, and the extreme side of things, like, no, you don't get to put that out there, because you're actually hurting people.
But it bothers me greatly, because in the existing laws, once you cross over into incitement to hatred, that's actually hate speech, and hate speeches can be punishable. And if it was treated seriously, we had the situation where Lorraine Higgins, former Senator Lorraine Higgins, who's now with the Retail Excellence Ireland, which is very funny, but for a different reason. She wanted to change social media as well. Again, about controlling social media, don't want to tax, but the law that actually exists resulted in a successful prosecution against the person who did threaten her online. So the laws are there. So we don't need them. We just need them to be enforced. We just need enforcement. Now, if you have a debate online and someone then oversteps into the realm where there is incitement to hatred, that's a problem. But it's even worse when you have someone doing it on a mainstream media platform who's actually doing it purely to be he's just he's a provocateur, he's contrarian, and you're going, no, you're just a dickhead.
They also know the law, and they have a whole legal team behind them that can, they know how to maneuver that way, that
they say with hands off.
And that they're just putting, this is the discussion that needs to be had, and all that kind of stuff. But what really bothers me is that even when you're talking about the cases, it's a class system again. Is that the laws can be there, we have all sorts of laws, but when it comes down to it, it's those that have money, that have means, that have power, and have the public behind them, because we're our own worst enemies half the time, because we buy into this self-defeating attitude sometimes that working classes aren't as worthy, and I don't know as much about this as another person does, because they've been better educated, or they have more money, or they have the best people behind them. But that tends to be where it happens. Like, she managed to sue somebody. There's probably a million working class people who have had hate speech coming at them from the government. I mean, the government are punching down on a regular basis. I love that you guys talk about it. Like, so, welfare cheats cheat us all. To me, it was just one of the worst things that ever came out of government, because it was the victim blaming, and particularly around homelessness, which obviously is going to bother me, and I'm going to be a little bit more aware of it. But that, for me, is, if it's coming from the government, it's similar to what's going on with Trump. People feel reinforced, they feel entitled to speak like this. They're like, well, if Leo Varadkar is calling these people criminals, why can't I?
And it is it's the worst kind of realpolitik that exists in Ireland today. It's again, we laugh at it, but when people say Trump comes out with awful dingers or whatever it is, we're not very far behind the curve here. We just happen to do it with a more polished and better marketed strategy. Yeah. Like, it is a strategy.
Which is even worse.
Of course, so
many people don't really see it for what it is.
When you had systemically the people from the Dublin Regional Homelessness Executive come out and try to normalise the increase in homelessness, when you had Owen Murphy admit that it's going to get worse to try and soften the beachhead, when you have the Taoiseach say on international standards we're not that bad, that is purely a narrative driven thing.
And purposely, he either is so unaware that he used incorrect statistics, which he should be, removed from his position immediately, or he purposely used incorrect statistics.
No, they use.
That's what I know. I mean, the two options, either of them, he needs.
Either
way,
you're incompetent. Yeah. No,
but they'll tell you that they're not incorrect statistics. They'll tell you there is a raft of statistics out there.
If you saw,
just picking some of them.
So Damien English said 17,000. Sorry, cut across you, but Damien English said 17,000 houses were built last year. Lorcan Sir went after him online and said, that's not true.
Yeah.
There was I think he identified less than 7,750. And he asked for a building in Ireland repeatedly.
But you've identified the problem right there.
Yeah, but hang on. What happened was 4 times he asked them. We went after it online. We supported Lorcan going after them. And they came back and they said, when the minister was speaking, he was speaking in terms of procurements, houses brought back into the system, he was making it up. So they came up with statistics to cover the lie. Yeah. So the statistics are completely invalidated.
They'll create whatever it needs to.
But if I'm an employer, and a multinational employer, and I want to bring staff in from anywhere in the world, and I look at the Irish statistics and housing, and I go, well, I can't house people. Why would I? And then if you're actually going to make plans in a local authority, and the government are saying, well, there's 12 local authorities built no houses last year. But statistically, they probably built 100 of them because they bought them off private landlords or whatever it was.
But I think you hit the nail on the head there. He can stand up in the Dáil and say that, and he can put it on the front page of a newspaper, and the whole country hears it. Lorcan Soares on Twitter, and his Twitter followers are, your Twitter followers or my Twitter followers who retweet him.
5% of people realise it was a lie. Yeah.
And that's so they're winning. That's all they need to do. They can put something out. They can even correct it. They can stick a little correction in the Irish Times, 2 days later. But it doesn't matter.
Agency.
Yeah.
It's those with agency.
Yeah. And choice.
And in honesty, the likes of Lorcan has far more agency than Tony or I or you or somebody who's homeless. They have zero agency for the position they're in. Then you have Lorcan who's halfway up the scale, who's trying to be a spokesperson, saying, look, there is a way to do this. And then you have the top of the ladder, and people do listen to Leo Varadkar. I know he talks utter bullshit, but they do listen to him.
Most people's whole lives aren't revolved around politics and aren't obsessed and on Twitter and aren't,
he's been marketed very well.
Yeah.
So you have a false narrative that's coming out there, and it's deliberate. There's nothing accidental about this. There's absolutely nothing.
That's the worst thing about it.
You have IBEC, you have CIF, you have all these people in lobbying. They're literally writing the script for these people. And if you don't think that's true, that they're writing the scripts, just look what happened with that phone call to the minister who decided for 2 minutes while he was sitting in an office getting paid ministerial money on a ministerial phone, working on ministerial time. I wasn't
in his area of.
I wasn't really a minister while I was answering that.
I was in a personal capacity.
Bullshit.
In his area of work, though, he wasn't talking to someone about farming.
Okay, so this is what you have going on. They're deliberately lying because they don't have to fool all of the people all of the time. They have to fool 33%, 36%, and that's what's going on. And they're fooling some of the people all of the time.
Yeah, but Martin, it's even simpler than that statistically. He doesn't have to fool 33% of the people, because no matter what, there's 20% of the people who know they're better off attaching their ship to Fine Gael, because that's who who will look after them. That's their socio-economic class. Then all they really need to do is trick 15% of people into thinking that you want to aspire to be in the 20%.
Now you have it, 100%.
It's why people are so angry with Labour, because like that, nobody, Fine Gael are only acting to their class, or only acting to their base.
They're doing their job.
Exactly. Yeah. Whereas Labour, are supposed to represent a certain class of people, or working class people, and what they're supposed to be over the past 100 years, and they made promises, they broke them. So people feel betrayed by them. I'm not surprised that Leo Varadkar is out there.
No. Am I surprised that Leo is Tory boy? No. I absolutely accept. Am I surprised that John Burton was Tory gay? Well, I can come out and say, I'm surprised that she was Tory girl. But I'm not really surprised, because when I look at Labour's history, they've always been the
propping up.
Brendan Ogle was the one, and he waved that big giant mallet of a hand in my face here when I spoke for Labour, and he said, "You who care about inequality, you, and they've betrayed it for 100 years, and you're going to speak for them." And I was pinned against the wall in pure fear while he was giggling like a maniac.
As far as I'm concerned, I don't even bother talking about Labour anymore. Labour is a spent force.
I would, on a lot of things, probably be more similar to you in that I'm probably just too compassionate. Not that you're not compassionate, you're actually more probably compassionate, but
no, Martin has no compassion.
Right, I try to understand, you try to see the best, you try to think these are only people, and they're coming from their own experiences and their own history, and why are they making these decisions? But then you get, like the Lorcan Sear point for me is something that I look at all the time now. If somebody is trying to do their best, like Owen Murphy, if he's genuinely trying to, fix this situation, why is he not talking to Lorcan Sear? And whatever the arena, whatever the spot.
Never mind Lorcan Soares. Lorcan and Mel Reynolds both said to us, just give Orla Hegarty into the Department of Housing for about 45 minutes, and she'll turn around and we'll start turning the corner on this thing. We had so the talent is there. We're so lucky. We get to speak to people like yourself, and we get to chat and find out that you're doing research on things that are happening around the world for best practices for teaching children about consent. So the talent is there and the ability is there, but the people who are at the top making the decisions, They're just interested in accumulating votes in the next election.
And it's ideology. Did you hear Rory Hearn on RT News the other night?
He did,
on the radio.
He was on the late debate.
Oh my!
I missed Rory.
And I can't remember actually who he was. Who it was?
It was a Fine Gael minister who
he left him flat-footed.
Yeah,
he actually said,
yes. How many of these are going to be affordable? And he was left flat-footed.
I don't know.
But it was so dismissive. Even it was like, I don't know. But before that, he was talking about, I have a lot of answers. Only that day on Murphy had said, you stop criticising me, stop
stop politicising.
Yeah, stop politicising my own brain. You're a politician. We expect it to be political.
Like, homelessness is very serious. It's like, so treat it seriously, Minister. Well, you're politicising it.
Yeah.
No, but that
was it. That was
politicising that actually came out way back, when the water protests first started out. And there was all these accusations. You are politicising something that shouldn't be politicised. And absolutely politicising. Yeah, absolutely. When a politician or politicians like he says, you're just politicising. All they want to do is deflect. You go just straight in the faces.
He was trying to stop Owen saying that. Like he was saying things that he knew where Owen was going to accuse him of. But even back to the that late debate. So that day he had actually said, "Give me the solutions. I want solutions." Rory Hearn was on the radio, literally laid out about 5 or 6 very practical solutions. And the minister that he was speaking to basically said, it's ideology. No, well, I don't expect the government to fix everything. That was his answer.
Yeah. There is a free market ideology, but the problem is it's not actually a free market. Exactly.
Anybody with basic economic.
Yeah. You only need to know that when you hear Tom Parlin speak, that it's clearly no free market. You only need to know that when you then speak to Orla Hegarty and she shows you how 10 small developers can actually start fixing the housing crisis without the need for the construction industry, Federation Big Boys, and actually create an actual free market where 10 developers are competing for tenders so that you bring the standards up instead of just giving a gift of this huge contract to a huge guy. And they say, he's the only one who can do it. Nonsense. So it's ideologically driven. But the problem is the guys who are making those decisions, they changed their tune where they said, Simon Coveney was going to fix the crisis of people living in emergency accommodation. Owen Murphy then went with money's not a problem. And now last week he started saying the line they're using now is all incentives are in place for building. Mm-hmm. Now, incentives in place for building just sounds very much like what's
not our fault. Nobody's
exactly.
To build.
Yeah.
Can I just say as well, just one case we had last week that we put out there, but it stayed with me. We had a family that were dealing with social services and the DRHE from early in the morning. They had to leave their home last minute. They couldn't bring anything. 2 young children. She was heavily pregnant, and her mother, the grandmother, was with her as well. So all day. Nobody managed to find accommodation for them. They were offered to go to the Midlands. They hadn't even got the money to go to the Midlands. So they were told then to present at a Garda station at 10 o'clock that night. One of our teams was actually entering the Garda station because the people do sleep there. And they were, linking in with them and seeing if they needed anything. So, a brilliant team leader came across them and she was there with them for an hour and a half. And we basically just caused such a fuss with the DRHE and the team that won't name who it was, but the team that was responsible for them, one of the NGOs. And all of a sudden, first of all, the guard said, you need to leave. You can't stay here. And we're going to call social services if you do stay here because you have the 2 kids in the guard station. So, and he also said, I'll give you a lift home. Now, it wasn't a situation that they should be going back to, and he knew that. They made it very clear why they left. So, you have a situation where people have managed to leave the home. That, it wasn't a good situation.
It was a brave step to do.
Probably took a long time to do. 2 young kids, 9 toddlers, 2 toddlers, 7 heavily pregnant. The guard said that he'd drop her home, and then we had a couple of people on the phone. I was online trying to book hotels, and because it eventually went past midnight, couldn't book online. We were ringing every hotel we've ever used, couldn't get anywhere. There wasn't a room to be had. And then one of the NGOs, they sent somebody down. She walked in with 4 sleeping bags. And our girl was like, I hope you are not walking in with these sleeping bags for this family. No, we have somewhere for them. They didn't want to go because they're so used to being treated so badly by the state that she wanted our team leader to go or not. But that's, Don Murphy can stand on the radio and say, whether there's rooms for everybody, all he likes. We have families being sent to Garda stations when the organisation that's sending them there knows that the Garda station can't keep them there. They can't, the guards can't, they can't stick somebody in a cell. So there's literally willingly sending people to the streets. But
the good thing about, and I mean this in the most cynical way, the good thing about that from the DRHE's mindset is that those people don't exist in the system. So they can say no one slept rough that night or whatever it is, because they can say they didn't come into their remit, you know, their persona non grata. So therefore we don't have to say the same, similar to when people during the snow presented and they were told, we don't have you on the list, off you go register. You know, so we have got a mentality here whereby if we're manipulating statistics to show that phantom houses have been built, and we're manipulating statistics to say rough sleepers, using that awful phrase, but that's what they're going to say. If you're going to say rough sleepers don't exist, you know.
Even that just drives me mad, because the government of all people have all the research in the world, all, whether you call it marketing, whether you call it research, they know exactly what using that phrase is doing by putting it out there. There's a huge amount of people that use that phrase with the best possible intention. It's just what they've heard, it's just the word they use. But by Murphy using it, he's labelling people, he's othering them, he's punching down on them. It's
coming to the point where we're back into the logic of saying that less than.
Yeah,
less than. So,
less deserving.
Eileen Gleason's phrase of, they didn't kind of get there overnight kind of sentence.
It's a lifestyle choice. Yeah. But, you and I have discussed, very quietly, we've tried to help people who are in situations.
Mind-blowing situations,
and we know situations that are just outrageously neglected people. Outrageously
and
neglected.
The more disadvantaged somebody is, it just compounds the difficulty in actually helping them. It makes it hard, and the more areas of disadvantage that they have, so whether that be class or, gender or a disability or national status. I mean, we've had cases where people DCC are trying to send people down the country because they just want them off the records. People have lived here for 10 years, but they might not have any other family here. They've jobs here. They're trying to send them down to another county.
We know somebody who, because they're homeless without an address.
Yeah. That
they're caught in this loop.
Yeah.
This is a person who can't access services because they're not mobile. So they're living homeless.
There is a huge issue.
Yeah, and that suits the agencies down to the ground.
Yeah.
This person can't advocate on their own behalf because they're actually so marginalised. That's what it is. They're being marginalised so bad through no fault of their own. And it actually suits the agencies because, you have to come to us. You need to advocate on your own behalf.
We've dealt with this. It's crazy stuff.
And the thing is, because that case is actually so awful that you don't want to give any identifying details. No, you don't want to, put that person in a position where they feel like there's been questions about, do they go public? Like, am I going to have to go public with this horrific story to get anything done? And I've been walking that line for, you said that to me 3 months ago.
3 months,
and it's the worst case I've ever come across, and the hardest to actually get anything done.
Can I also say something that you spoke about the NGOs, and we know that this is becoming increasingly a real problem, where you have NGOs being actually now comfortable being referred to as partners and service providers, and that industry of homelessness becoming a huge issue, whereby Peter McVerry has come out and said, I've lost faith in this government, that they want to I've lost faith in the government's ability to tackle this crisis. Actually, I've lost faith that they want to tackle this crisis. And he was pretty damn powerfully out there saying, no, they don't really want to do it. But then on the flip side, you have the CEO of Peter McVerry Trust standing with Owen Murphy in front of microphones. Standing there validates Owen Murphy. Yeah. Standing there shows that, and they can turn around and say, it becomes business speak, and it becomes the market again, because they're talking to our partners who we work in conjunction with, and the language is very much the language of business. And I'm sorry,
but it is business.
Yeah, but so now are we comfortable that people are a commodity that we use as units on a page? That's what we are talking about.
Yeah. It used to be houses we were talking about. Now it's actually not a level where we are talking about people as units and as commodities. I do want to say there's a huge amount of amazing people that work in the NGOs and that work in homeless services. They didn't get it. Anybody that's got into that industry has done it because of their passion for it and their wanting. And I'm talking even at the top level. There's people who have been doing this work for decades. But what's happened is that it's like being institutionalized. And there's people that are running these organizations who, at this stage, it is a business. And I think they justify it to themselves by saying, right, I think we do the best work. I see the work that's being done. So it justifies the means of what they're doing. So going out,
for the greater good.
For the greater good.
Yeah.
But again, where's your line? Does that line keep dropping and dropping and dropping until you're not in a position to be calling out? Like, I do believe that charities, and I think it's actually one of the most important things that ICHH does, is to hold the government to account and to hold the people with the purse strings to account and the policy writers. And you're not seeing enough of that by the NGOs. That, to me, is a huge aspect of what they're supposed to do. Mm. And it's not happening enough because, and I know from experience from people I've dealt with, particularly in the previous government, that if you go out and say the wrong thing, if, you know, there was instances before where money was being held back.
Funding has been withheld and don't release those statistics or you won't get paid.
We're still waiting on last month's statistics from Murphy's office. And we go out,
it's because it's the 10,000 one. It's because it's the 10,000 staff.
And only the other day they came out with, actually, what was it? It was the rough sleeper count, but which is they actually that's what they actually call it. But basically, when they went out and counted everybody that sleeps on the streets, they might as well have balloons going off when they were talking about the reduction in numbers.
They were thrilled.
The previous increase was so horrific and so bad that, of course, there was the percentage reduction was going to be. I
actually had somebody say to me, "The trend is down," and I'm going, "Yeah."
Yeah, when you're in the sky, there's only one way to go. I mean,
very much the same way in trolleys. So people waiting on trolleys at this time of the year are actually at an all-time high for this time of the year, okay? But they were saying, well, the trend is down from when? From the winter? You moron. You know what I mean? You're not comparing like with like. Yeah. We're still over 550 people on trolleys, but because it's not the 750 that happened during the flu epidemic, it's down. It's not down. It's actually still at an all-time high if you take it year on year. Yeah. But if we take a photograph in time and we compare it to what happened
this time last year,
it's just
this time 25 years ago. I was only having this conversation with somebody last week, in that, like, our healthcare system, our housing system, our, you know, safety is basically, we're in a worse position than we were. As a family, you're in a worse position than we were 10 years ago, 20 years ago. If your child can't, you leave the house and access, you know, a house to live in, a room to live in somewhere. If you aren't sure that if you get sick and you go to a hospital, that you're going to actually be seen to. If you're nervous about I have a grandmother who just went to the hospital. I'm genuinely I'm nervous about her being in hospital because I'm worried about this. And there's amazing, it's not the nurses, there's amazing healthcare professionals out there, but the systems are broken. Why are we going down?
The only difference between now in homelessness and 1845 in homelessness is the potato blight. That's the only difference.
And the money being made off it.
There was money made off it back then.
Well, yeah, a lot more money being made off it now. I mean, this is the thing, the amount of stakeholders now.
And I know Owen Murphy argued this, but homelessness has never been as bad since the famine. And they can argue it all they like. That's the truth. New York had its worst homelessness crisis last year since, I think they put the figure down at something like 1886 or 96, something like that. And I went, we beat you. We're the best in the world. We're worse than we were going back as far as, the mid-1800s.
But I think it comes back to what you just said there a second ago as well about not comparing like for like, and not, there's not enough critical thinking, I think, when we're told information from the media. We have a huge media problem in this country, and it's all come to the fore now, thankfully.
We had a conversation about that last night with Glenn Fitz and Steph from the SUS. And it was a good chat, but what really is the problem is you have reportage being done, but it's not even reportage anymore. It's purely passing on sound bites. So they report on what the minister has said or what the department have released. Now, in other worlds, where if I'm a pro-life person who works for the Irish Times, for example, and I write a piece, I may be asked to get the opinion of a pro-choice person. If I'm a pro-choice, I'm probably more than likely going to be asked to get the opinion of a bloody bishop to counter what I've said.
There's analysis there.
There's at least the two backwards and forwards. But when it comes to a lot of these pieces, they're just simply, these are the statistics, this is what they've said. Now, we have great people like Lorcan, like Mel, like Orla, like these, like Anthony.
They're not journalists.
No, but they're actually taking the fight by going on and saying no. We call bullshit.
Yeah. And
that's starting to permeate up slowly. But if you're around a dinner table, 6 people out of 7 are going to say to you, "Yeah, no, the figures look good. They're I saw the thing. They're all on the way up." And you go, "Did you not see the counter to that?" No.
Yeah.
And so they don't.
People
I
are
think if you're at a
busy.
dinner party, you're part of the problem.
But people are so busy.
Hands up, I am the problem.
No, but people have so much going on.
Yeah.
People genuinely do. And you can't expect everybody to be interested in the same things that you're interested in. So, I'll read everything that Mel writes, or I'll be following all of Lorcan's tweets to be like, right, how's he cut them out this time, or where, what? And I'm cynical. So I question everything. I don't believe Autumn. And I always question somebody's reason for being involved. I question their motives. And I think Mel is great at that. He points that out. I listened to him doing a talk one time, and he's like, whoever you're listening to, when they're giving you this information, you need to question, have they got a motivation for it? And that should be done across the board. Why is somebody telling you this?
Just going to change the subject
Yeah.
a little. You've questioned these motivations before, and you've asked these questions about something that happened here in Dublin quite a long time ago. It's the Stardust. You've been asking questions about this, and you have very personal involvement in this.
Yeah, so my mum was a victim of the Stardust, really badly injured in it. She was in hospital for a long time after. And so I grew up knowing about the Stardust, and it was only around the corner. I'm from Kilmore, and it's only around the corner in our town. But Antoinette Keegan and among others, but the Keegan family particularly, they lost two sisters. And they kind of led the campaign way back, 37 years ago, before I was born. My family were very involved. All the families were very involved. And they were treated, I think a lot of people do know the story, but they were treated terrifically.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in my opinion, the level of corruption around the whole thing is it's very representative of how politics was back then, that we know. I don't think a huge amount has changed. It's more polished, and it's not so obvious. We don't have people like Charlie Haughey, who you look back now and you think, how did everybody not know? Like, how did everybody not know he's walking down this structure? I suppose, yeah, they probably did know. But a lot of people, he had a huge amount of support. People thought he was this working class hero as well, for weird, unknown reasons.
So it's the same. It's the same thing that Varadkar does now. He sold to that. He marketed to that percentage of people. He fooled some of the people all of the time.
Well, yeah, and enough people that will go out and say the same thing to other people.
Yes.
But yeah, so I obviously know, I know the in-depth details of the reports and the reports that have been done since, and we've got independent experts in. Antoinette Keegan and her mother have been fighting for this for decades. So basically what's happened now is that Lynn Boylan has become involved with the barrister Dar, who looked after the Ibrahim Halawa case.
Yeah.
They're taking it, I suppose the direction that's been taken is that the coroner's report was never completed. There was no inquest completed. It's still open, basically. And we know that there's a huge amount of evidence that has surfaced since. So, for instance, phone calls that were made that actually timed the fire earlier than it was reported in the original report has surfaced but has never been taken into account. And you have to question why the most vital pieces of evidence right throughout the years are continuously being ignored. And my feeling on it, and the feeling of anybody who knows all the details that I know, is that it's because it highlights the level of corruption that happened, from day one. That the original tribunal was, in my opinion, it was decided before they even went into the courtroom. The level of lies that went in. I remember my mum tells a story about when she was still in hospital when the tribunal was going on. So she was wheeled in one day to see, the evidence that was happening. And as she wheeled in, it was her birthday when when they all went out that night, and she was 16. So when she was wheeled in, she's only a teenager. She saw one of the bouncers on the stand. And she said she got this almost giddy, like, she knew him. I wonder, will he recognise me kind of thing. Even after everything that had happened, she's still a teenage girl. She suddenly started to talk about how there was no chains on the doors and and she's looking at him thinking, he's lying. Mm-hmm. I nearly died. All her friends died. She basically was left, like she says when she got out of hospital, because she was so severely injured. And a lot of people had not moved on in any sense of the word, but a lot of people had they'd either physically recovered and just weren't speaking about it and were trying to push it out of their minds. But by the time she got out of hospital and was at home and was physically starting to recover, nobody came near her. She didn't speak to anybody. It was probably, I think she was about 8 months or 9 months, in a room, kind of on her own. Obviously, there was the neighbours and there was family and things like that, but she just said nobody knew what to say to her. All her friends that she had went with had died. She was 3rd-degree burns on 100% of her body. Jeez. And then but to compound that, then you have politicians lying through their teeth in front of you, and the experts standing on the stand saying that this must have happened. She's like, but I was there. That didn't happen. That couldn't have been. And the stuff that was being put out there was so unbelievable that they had to be lying. There had to be a motivation behind it.
An open wound there in the heart of North County Dublin, or North Dublin.
Everybody that I know has some.
I've worked with people who were there, and My uncle was there that night as a taxi driver trying to pull bars out of windows. I mean, I know all of this.
The only person ever, I mean, Christy Moore, who wrote the song about it, They Never Came Home, and there was potential for him being charged because it was defamation.
That's right.
Butterley he received a payout. There was initially going to be no compensation for victims.
Well, I mean, the whole thing about it is about liability. Who is liable? Anybody who knows even the rudimentaries about this knows, who was liable. Was the fire started maliciously, or did the fire happen through neglect? And that's basically the bottom line on this. And it was easy to say the fire was started maliciously, an unknown X, and therefore no compensation has to be paid out.
It wasn't just unknown though. People were actually labelled as having started this fire after. People went on to commit suicide directly because they'd been accused of starting this fire, which we now know has actually been officially put on record that it wasn't started by... No, it can't be said that it was started by arson. So, but yet nobody, when that judgment was made, right, we can't say that this was arson. Nobody said, okay, why don't we just go back and see why they said that in the first place? How did Keane reach that decision? Because
how?
Why? Like why? Why?
What's the purpose of that decision? Well, the purpose of that decision is to limit liability.
Well, actually, and Butcherley basically, it was to limit liability, but as well, if the decision was made that it was arson, he was able to claim off his insurance. He built his fortune on that, on the back of the Stardust.
Look, this is going back 20 years ago. I was in a fire on the 6th floor of a Georgian building. And I knew where the seat of the fire was because it nearly fucking killed me. Yeah. So I knew who it was. There was children involved. There was... everybody had to be cleared. Nobody died. Yeah. Nobody was seriously injured. People did end up in hospital. Yeah. No report was ever done. There was never a fire report, even though people almost died. Yeah. No, and I went apeshit looking for this. I spent years going through courts trying to look at this. The abject corruption involved. So Stardust is not the only place. No. But this is still going on. This, so that people can claim off their insurance, and yet those who are affected by it, nothing, out in the cold. But the thing it's still going on to this day.
Yeah, if the facts make it out into the cold, hard light today, it'll be so obvious of the level of corruption that was involved, and has also been covered up since, and that's the real issue. So there's a campaign going to be launched very soon. It's going to be a postcard campaign, so we're looking to the Minister for Justice has been put on notice basically that there will be a request going in to complete the inquest. That in itself should lead to a verdict, which we're hoping should lead to further investigation, because the facts are there. We just need somebody to look at them. €200,000 was spent on the most recent report to decide a report wasn't needed.
That's right.
200
That's right. Well, I mean, when they're doing reports to tell you don't need a report, well, then you absolutely do need a report.
They didn't interview anybody. They didn't actually look at the new evidence. They didn't, it's the level of corruption that's clearly going on in this. But
again, that's a pattern that they follow over into other areas. We don't need a report. Yeah, but if you actually look at it, but we don't really want to look at it, so we don't need a report.
Why are you saying so hard? Just do the report.
It's very common in Irish society. We say we're going to ask for a report, and then we set the parameters so we get the result that we prefer. Yeah. And that's just common practice.
When is this kicking off?
So it'll be after repeal, because obviously everybody's really involved in repeal. Again, it's been led by Lynn Boylan and Enda Fannin, but it's not a party political thing. It's across the board. We're looking for support from everybody. I mean, there's a lot of people like Tommy Brown and John Lyons and Michael O'Brien who have consistently over the years supported.
Well, Lynn and John, they're great people. You're naming great people.
Yeah, they're genuinely interested in the interest of justice. So, so basically after repeal, what will be happening, there'll be a launch. Keep an eye on Twitter and Facebook. There's Justice for the Stardust pages on there. We'll be looking for people to take postcards, to maybe come out and hand some out if you can. We're going to be lobbying to make sure that public support is obvious on this, so that they realise that it's not going away. That they very similar to the similarities to Hillsborough are striking.
Well, we're a stone's throw from it here. We are a stone's throw from it here. So, and I know that in the memory of a lot of Dublin people, that has not gone away. It's still very fresh. There's a whole section of community, not just physically scarred, but families mentally scarred. Generations, going into 2 generations now.
Well, my life was very strongly affected by it growing up, and I can imagine it will impact generations of families to come, because the psychological impacts that it has on a family, which were never acknowledged, are huge. So we just need to just draw a line in the sand, and also what that does is it sets your stall out to say, we're not going to accept you doing this anymore.
That's right.
We're not going to let it go. Yeah.
Well, thanks very much for raising that, Liz, and thank you very much for coming in to us.
Thanks. Great
Hopefully when repeal is
true,
then we will come back and we will revisit this. Stardust, something I've been interested in. You know, I remember it. I was only small. But I do remember that night. I remember my father and my uncles that night. So yeah, definitely, with somewhere I'd like to come back to.
That's great. Thanks very much for the support, guys.
Now, Claire, it's actually great to talk to you, but it's almost even more inspiring is the fact that we've managed to cover ASFI, Inner City Helping Homelessness, the housing crisis, and now you're talking about the Stardust. Fair play to you, because that is some amount of activism.
To me, this is a break from two toddlers.
Yeah, it may well, and you know,
and two more toddlers.
Two grown toddlers.
Still not potty trained in this one. But no, look, thanks very much, and it is, and fair play to you. It's a great credit to you, and you know, and the people that you work with. It's we're thrilled to see that these sort of things, and you know what, we really appreciate you and what you do. So thanks very much.
Thanks so much for having me, guys.
Thank you.
Listen, guys, thanks for listening. Do hit subscribe. Do tell your friends. Listen, independent, listener-led content matters. We need that. We need media diversity. We need media plurality. Share the news. Thank you.